Welcome back to our channel, where real stories remind us that kindness, courage, and justice can come from the most unexpected people. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that will move your heart and restore your faith in humanity. Now, let's get into today's story, one that starts with pain, but ends with powerful justice. It was a quiet afternoon in a small town outside of Denver. The streets were almost empty, the sky clear and blue, and the local diner, Millie's Place, smelled of fresh coffee and homemade pie. Inside, a few regulars chatted quietly, and the jukebox hummed an old country song. Among the crowd sat an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson. Everyone called her Grandma Mary. She was the kind of woman who never missed a day at Millie's. Every morning, she'd sit at the corner booth by the window, order her usual cup of black coffee, and spend an hour knitting or reading. People loved her. She was warm, gentle, and always had a smile for everyone. But that morning, something different happened. A man walked into the diner. He was tall, rough-looking, with a short temper that you could feel from across the room. His name was Rick, a local mechanic who was known to have problems with anger and drinking. No one ever confronted him, though. People usually just stayed out of his way. Grandma Mary didn't know him personally, but fate was about to bring them face to face in a way that would shock the entire town. Outside, a small boy, maybe 8 years old, was standing by the window, holding a paper bag. His name was Ben. He was Grandma Mary's grandson. Every Saturday, his mom dropped him off so he could have breakfast with his grandmother. It was their special tradition. Ben spotted his grandma through the window and smiled. He pushed the door open and ran toward her, shouting, "Grandma!" But before he could reach her, Rick bumped into him, spilling his drink. The boy apologized quickly, but Rick wasn't in the mood for apologies. His voice rose, angry and sharp. "Watch where you're going, kid." The diner fell silent. Ben froze, his little hands shaking. Grandma Mary got up immediately, her knitting needles clattering on the table. She walked over and put her hand on Ben's shoulder. "It's all right, sweetheart," she said softly. Then she turned to Rick. "There's no need to yell at a child." Rick glared at her. "Maybe you should teach him some manners," he said, taking a step closer. "Maybe you should mind your own temper," she replied calmly, though her voice trembled slightly. Something snapped inside Rick. Without warning, he shoved the old woman backward. The room gasped as she stumbled and hit the floor hard. The sound echoed through the diner like a slap across the soul. Ben screamed, "He hit my grandma," and dropped to his knees beside her. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he tried to help her up. The customers were stunned, frozen. No one moved, afraid of the man towering over them. Rick, realizing what he'd done, sneered and muttered, "She shouldn't have gotten in my way," before walking out as if nothing had happened. But as fate would have it, justice was already waiting outside, wearing leather jackets and riding chrome motorcycles. You see, just down the street, a group of bikers had stopped for gas. They were members of a local biker club known as the Iron Widows. Despite their intimidating looks, they were known for community work, helping kids, protecting the elderly, and standing up against abuse. One of them, a big guy named Mason, noticed the commotion in the diner. He saw the man storm out, his face red with rage. And then, moments later, he saw a small boy come running out, tears streaming down his cheeks, shouting the words that would make every biker's blood boil. "He hit my grandma. He hit my grandma." Mason turned to his crew. "Did you hear that?" he asked. The others nodded grimly. "Yeah," said one named Colt. "Let's see what's going on." They parked their bikes right in front of the diner, engines rumbling like thunder. Mason got off his bike and crouched down to the boy's level. "Hey, little man, what did you say?" Ben was crying too hard to speak clearly. He hit my grandma inside, she fell." Without another word, Mason looked at his brothers. "Stay with the kid. I'll go check." He pushed open the door to the diner. Inside, people were helping Grandma Mary sit up. She looked pale, shaken, but conscious. Mason gently knelt beside her. "Ma'am, you all right?" She looked up at the big man with tattoos and a leather vest and gave a faint nod. "Just a little shaken, son." "Who did this?" he asked quietly. Before she could speak, one of the waitresses pointed toward the window. "That man. He just walked out. The one heading toward that old pickup." Mason stood up slowly, his eyes narrowing. Outside, Rick was climbing into his truck, smirking like he had nothing to fear. But fear was coming for him. Mason and 3 other bikers walked out. The sound of their boots on the pavement was heavy and deliberate. They stood in front of Rick's truck. Rick leaned out the window, his arrogance showing. "What's your problem?" Mason's voice was calm but dangerous. "You hit an old woman. That's our problem." Rick laughed mockingly. "What? You gonna teach me a lesson? Get out of my way before I—" But before he could finish, Colt stepped forward and kicked the side of his truck door shut. The sound echoed down the street. "Listen," Mason said, his tone dropping low. "You don't touch women. You don't touch kids. You don't touch anyone who can't fight back. You got that?" Rick's confidence started to fade. "Look, man, it was an accident." "Accident?" Mason barked. "You shoved her hard enough to knock her down. You think that's an accident?" By now, a small crowd had gathered. People from the diner stepped outside, whispering. Ben held his grandma's hand as they watched from the doorway. Rick, seeing he was outnumbered, tried to start his truck, but Mason grabbed the keys straight from the ignition. "Not so fast. You're gonna go inside, apologize to that woman, and you're gonna mean it. Or we'll make sure you regret ever walking into this town." Rick looked around. 4 bikers, a crowd, and a boy staring at him with pure hurt in his eyes. Slowly, reluctantly, he got out of the truck. His hands trembled slightly. He walked back into the diner, Mason right behind him. Inside, the room was silent again. Rick cleared his throat. I'm sorry," he muttered. Mason leaned closer. Louder. Rick swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I shouldn't have done that." Grandma Mary looked at him for a long moment. "You shouldn't have," she said softly. "But I hope someday you learn to be better than this." Rick nodded, ashamed, and left quietly. The bikers stayed behind to make sure she was okay. The waitress brought water, and Mason crouched beside Ben. "She's tough, your grandma," he said with a grin. "You don't have to worry, kiddo. We got your back." Ben managed a small smile. "Thank you." From that day on, the Iron Widows made it a point to stop by Millie's diner every weekend. They'd check in on Grandma Mary, have a cup of coffee, and make sure no one ever bothered her again. People started calling them the Guardian Angels on Wheels. Word spread quickly through town about what had happened. Rick, humiliated, avoided the diner and eventually left town. And Grandma Mary, she recovered, her spirit stronger than ever. Weeks later, Ben drew a picture at school of his grandma, him, and 4 bikers standing beside shining motorcycles. When his teacher asked about it, he smiled proudly and said, "They're my friends. They protect people who can't protect themselves." That picture ended up hanging on the wall inside Millie's diner, right above Grandma Mary's booth. The bikers smiled every time they saw it. It reminded them why they rode. Not for fame, not for fear, but for something simple, doing the right thing. As months passed, the diner became a symbol of community strength. Every Saturday, the sound of motorcycle engines signaled not trouble, but safety. Families felt safe, kids waved, and Grandma Mary's booth was always full of laughter again. One evening, Mason stopped by alone. Grandma Mary was knitting as usual. She smiled when she saw him. "Evening, Mason. Coffee." "Always," he said, taking a seat. She poured him a cup and said, "You know, I never thought I'd see the day when a bunch of bikers would become the talk of the town for protecting an old lady." Mason chuckled. "We just did what anyone should do, ma'am." "Not everyone would've," she said gently. "Most people stay quiet when they see wrong. But you didn't." He looked down for a moment. "I had a mom like you once," he said softly. "She raised me to respect people. Lost her a few years back. When I saw that man shove you, all I could think was, if that was my mom, I'd want someone to stand up for her." Grandma Mary reached across the table and patted his hand. "Your mother would be proud of you." He smiled faintly. "I hope so." Later that night, Mason rode home under the fading sunset, thinking about what she said. Sometimes, doing good didn't need a reward. Sometimes, it just needed heart. A few months later, the town held a small community festival. The Iron Widows were invited as guests of honor. When Mason and his crew arrived, kids ran up to them, parents waved, and Grandma Mary was waiting with a homemade pie. She handed it to Mason and said, "For my heroes." He laughed. "Ma'am, we're not heroes." She winked. "Maybe not in your book. But in ours, you are." The crowd clapped as the bikers stood there, humbled. That moment became one of the most talked about events in town. People started believing in standing up for each other again. They realized that real strength isn't about muscles or motorcycles, it's about protecting what's right. Years later, Ben grew up and became a police officer. At his graduation ceremony, Grandma Mary was in the front row, tears in her eyes. Afterward, he hugged her and said, "You know, Grandma, the day those bikers helped you, I decided that's what I wanted to do too. I wanted to protect people." She smiled proudly. "And now you will, my boy." He paused for a moment. "Do you think they'd be proud of me?" She chuckled. "Oh, honey, they already are." In a small frame on Ben's desk sat that same drawing he made as a kid, the one of his grandma, the bikers, and himself. The reminder that one act of courage can change someone's life forever. Sometimes heroes wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear leather jackets. And sometimes, they're just people who decide to do the right thing when everyone else looks away. So the next time you see someone being mistreated, remember this story. You might not ride a motorcycle, but you can still stand up. Because courage isn't about what you ride, it's about what you stand for. And that's the story of how one small boy's cry, "He hit my grandma," brought justice roaring down the street on two wheels. If you believe in kindness, courage, and standing up for what's right, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more stories that remind us all, good people still exist.